Good evening and aloha. I'm U.S. Congressman Ed Case, and I'm coming to you from Honolulu. I'm home for just a few days before I have to go back to D.C. tomorrow. Again, I represent Hawaii's great first congressional district. The first congressional district, one of two districts in our state, is the city of Honolulu from Makapu'u in the east all the way to Mililani and to Kapolei. And that's home to 710,000 people that are my constituents in the United States House of Representatives. That's half the population of our fine state. And so I definitely am responsible for representing the urban part of our state. And of course, in our very small state, indirectly, I also represent the other half as full state delegation, including my partners, Senators Schatz and Hirono and Representative Takuda. Welcome to another of my regular live community meeting talk stories. This is my seventh of 2026. I've done hundreds throughout my years in Congress, seven here in 2026. The first earlier this year, the first six earlier this year were in person. This one is a Tele-Talk story. I find that it really reaches folks that can't usually come to one of my in person, so I try to mix it up. And for me, these talk stories are absolutely critical to my representing our Hawaii and you 5,000 miles away in Congress. I spend over half of my year every year on Capitol Hill, a long way away from you. And I very much need to stay in touch with you at all times. I feel that I need to report back to you on what I'm up to in Congress. And I especially need your guidance and I need to answer your questions. And these talk stories are one of the great ways that I have to do exactly that. And so I look forward to another one of my talk stories. Just a note about how this talk story is gonna go. First of all, I'm going to give you a congressional report. Hopefully, I won't go more than about half an hour with that. And then at that point, I'm going to turn this over to you to listen to your concerns and try to answer your questions. To get your questions into line and to me, please email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov. Or if you're watching this in Facebook, you can put your comments in Facebook and that will come in straight there and my staff will get them to me. We're going to have to end at 7:30 p.m. if we don't end before that. I also want to start by giving you some background information on my office and how to get more information on all of the stuff that I'm up to and how to get your thoughts to me and to contact me further. The fastest, easiest, and best way into my office, into my activities is through my website at case.house.gov. That is case.house.gov. And on case.house.gov, I've tried to add in all of the possible information anybody might need about my office, my activities, and how to get in touch with me. It has my activities. Lots of times people want to know what I voted on, how I voted. All of my votes are on my website. It has all of my communications with you to include press releases and statements and other stuff. It also has a link to my social media. I run very active social media across many platforms, and you can get to that through my website. It talks about my individual constituent services, which we do, and finally, it has exactly how to contact us. Again, you can also email or call us at ed.case@mail.house.gov, or you can call my district office. I have a district office right here in Honolulu at 808-650-6688, and that is on my website. Okay, I always like to start my talk stories with my mission. I think it's important for all of us to have a clear mission that we follow and the goals that we follow to achieve our mission, and then the approaches we take to get to our goals to fulfill our mission. So I've got three parts to my mission, and these have been my mission parts throughout my service in Congress. My first mission is what the Constitution says my mission is, and that is to contribute to national leadership of our country and given our country's standing in the world, really our world. My job is to act for you as part of national leadership in guiding our country and as part of the legislative branch, Congress, a separate, independent, and co-equal branch of government. That's my number one job. Number two is to make sure our federal government is helping our Hawaii. all of the concerns that we have here in Hawaii, part of which are shared by the rest of the country, and part of which many times are very, very unique to our Hawaii, all have something that our federal government can and should be assisting us with. And sometimes assisting doesn't mean positive assistance. Sometimes assisting means not doing things that mess us up here in Hawaii. And so that's number two in my mission is being your federal representative, your person on the job in our federal government that knows how to help our Hawaii and have our federal government help our Hawaii. That's number two. And then number three is helping you with your individual concerns. All of us have our individual concerns in our everyday life, and many of these affect the federal government. And my job is to help you with those concerns. Again, I'll get into that. And every single day in my Washington, D.C. Capitol Hill office and in my Honolulu office, my staff and I work on all three parts of those missions to achieve our overall service to you and to our Hawaii and to our country. So that's my mission, and everything else is going to flow from those three parts of my mission. I want to start with a little bit of an overview of where I think we are, the challenges that we face, to place them into some context, if I could, because I think it's always good to go back to the basics. What is really going on in the big picture, and how do we fit into all of that, and how do we deal with it? Our incredible country that we all love and cherish turns 250 years old in just over a month. 250 years of an incredible country. We are the oldest continuous democracy in our world. We have the oldest written constitution in our world. Sometimes we take all of this for granted, that somehow it will just continue on for another 250 years. But history teaches us that that's an effort that we have to put in to cherishing and carrying forward this country. Our country is still incredibly admired and respected around the world. People want to come here. People believe in our dream. People want to live in democracy to fulfill the promise of our Declaration of Independence. Our country is a great country, and yet we all know that we live in a time of such incredible and rapid challenge that faces and sometimes we feel like overwhelms us all. We are, just as a couple of examples, well into the beginning of the age of artificial intelligence. And we're dealing with the challenges of how to understand how that's going to affect us and how to come up with wise policies to guide it. We are in a time of challenge through our democracy itself, and I definitely will get into that tonight. We are in a time of the rise of alternative forms of government that have no respect for our form, that have their own authoritarian ideas about how to govern and how to lead, that I don't think any of us want to be a part of. I talk specifically about the People's Republic of China, our largest generational challenge, and its friends around the world, countries like Russia, Iran, and North Korea. They have a different approach, and that's an incredible challenge for us. We live in a time of widespread and even growing inequality that, left unchecked, is destructive to our form of government and to our democracy. Of course, we also live in a time of incredible division and polarization in our own governance and in the governance of the world in many cases, and that's something that I live with every day. And this all causes incredible uncertainty and doubt. And of course, as I already said, we're living in a time that if all of those challenges weren't enough, we are dealing with internal challenges to our own foundations, not external, it's internal. So obviously a time of great uncertainty and doubt, but let me say, I believe very deeply that we can and will navigate this all, but if this won't just happen automatically, if first we are honest about what we face. Denial is one of the worst things that we can get into now. We need to be very clear-eyed and open-eyed about what we face. What is artificial intelligence going to do? What are the challenges of our changing demographic, for example? And we have to ask why we're facing those challenges and what the options are for how to face those challenges and overcome those challenges with real practical solutions, not a lot of yelling and screaming and talking over each other, but by talking specifically about the challenges and coming up with real practical solutions. And then finally, we need to defend our democracy at all costs. And if we do all of that, then I believe that we will navigate the challenges that our country faces today and tomorrow, just as we have faced comparable challenges over the last 250 years. Now, as part of that, there are 1,000 issues that I face every single day. And I want to talk about the issues to talk about when it comes time for our questions. But I want to cover three in particular that are very much central to my efforts and to my thinking and to my activities and service on behalf of you in our U.S. Congress, and then discuss others during your questions. So let's take these one at a time. The first one I want to face with you is what is the number one concern for virtually all Americans today, and that is our unacceptably high cost of living. Prices are too high, incomes are too low, and there's simply too much pressure on each and all of us in our everyday life that should not be. And nowhere, obviously, in the country is this more true than in our Hawaii. Now, some of that is our situation here, being an isolated island group in the middle of the Pacific, but that's absolutely not the end of the story. There are many, many decisions and choices we can make to assist with our high cost of living here and to reduce it. And I want to talk about some of these areas and ask specifically why we are facing high costs of living. Because what I don't believe in is just bemoaning it and saying there's nothing we can do about it and pretending as if it's just one big issue or that for that matter that there's a silver bullet there that we can pursue that will just magically reduce our cost of living. What I believe in doing is asking what are the drivers, the specific drivers of the high cost of living in each parts of the high cost of living that is so crippling to all of us, from housing to food to electricity and gas and education and healthcare and childcare and much more. And then for each of those, ask what can we do about that generally? And then for me, what can our federal government do about each of those areas that will help us to reduce our high cost of living? And so here are just a few areas of many, many actions that we could take. Now, I want to start with one that is controversial, that I take a lot of heat from, that people that don't like what I say want to kick me out of office for, and that's the Jones Act. The Jones Act is a 105-year-old federal shipping law that restricts the amount of ships that can transit between two U.S. ports. Now, that's actually not that big a deal on the continent because there's lots of other ways to move things around. But here, that's crippling. And what it has led to is an essential monopoly by just a very few companies who charge monopolistic prices when far lower prices are available in the world itself. And that cannot be acceptable, especially when we face a situation where over 90% here come in by ship, and so they're subject to the Jones Act. By one calculation, the Jones Act adds close to $2,000 per year per family for every family throughout Hawaii, as compared to what we might be able to do if the Jones Act was modified to adjust to our specific situation. And so I have again introduced legislation in Congress to do a number of things with the Jones Act, either exempt Hawaii and our other island jurisdictions from the Jones Act, or link the prices that can be charged to worldwide shipping prices, or require that the Jones Act be waived when we get into a monopoly situation as we do here today. And I have worked, for example, with the Trump administration on some of the consequences of the Jones Act. For example, one of the major consequences of the unauthorized war that the president is waging in Iran, which we can talk about in other contexts, later is a tremendous increase in the world oil prices and a tremendous set of pressures on the international market. We don't get our oil here, which still accounts for most of our energy, from the United States continent, a continent which exports oil, not exports oil. The Jones Act is the reason why we don't get our oil from the mainland. We have to get our oil in the international market. And so if the international market is disrupted shipping wise, then we need to get our oil from the US mainland. And yet the Jones Act says that an international ship can't come along and pick up oil and bring it down to us. The president rightly waived that requirement, and I worked with him to do that. So that's the Jones Act. We can get into that if you want. Very controversial. Obviously, you can see that if you're part of that monopoly, you want to keep that monopoly, and thus the very stringent opposition to what I'm saying and doing. Number two, tariffs. Some form of tariff, and let's be clear about what a tariff is. A tariff is a tax on goods and services coming into our country, and that tax is passed along to you. And so if tariffs are very, very high, then the cost of the goods coming in here and coming down here to Hawaii is going to be much higher. And that's exactly what's happened with the president's unacceptably high tariff policy, which I think most of us agree was inconsistent, not tied to any specific goals, and has been very destructive to prices. By one calculation, families here in Hawaii and across the country pay some $2,000 extra per year because of those high tariffs, especially crippling to our small businesses who have to import a lot of what they need. And so I've opposed those Trump tariffs as part of reducing the cost of living. Energy. We have paid some of the highest energy costs in the entire country, especially in a time of disruption of world oil supply. I have believed deeply in renewable energy for decades now as the only way to a better energy future, not just from a climate change perspective, not just from a fossil fuel reduction perspective, but just from a price perspective. And we see that happening today when we again witness how volatile the price of oil can be and oil generated energy, depending on what's happening out there in the world. So I very much worked for federal assistance of renewable energy development. Food, a major cost of each of our families, and always so frustrating to realize that we have some of the highest yield, most productive agricultural land in the entire world, and yet we cannot more of our own food and avoid the prices of bringing it here from elsewhere. There is federal assistance that I fight for to boost our local growers to a place where we can yield a critical mass of key food supplies that can be provided to us on a much more affordable basis. I also believe that we need to fight for those that are in food, particular food needs through programs such as SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, that this president is trying to cut, and other assistance for those in need. Healthcare, a major component of high prices. I have fought for prescription drug cost reductions a long time now. They have been more successful of late with some of the laws that we passed in the last couple of years. And to their credit, with the Trump administration also following through on capping some of those prescription drug costs. But there's much more that needs to be done. And of course, if we're talking about high costs, we always have to remember that Medicare and Medicaid are some of our most critical key programs. And without those, we would be in a world of hurt that would not be acceptable to any family here. And so I'm very much committed to sustaining and preserving and protecting Medicare and Medicaid. Education, a major cost driver for many of us. I try to help there by maintaining our student loan programs, which has helped so many with their educations, as well as just supporting the University of Hawaii, our flagship institution, and all of its parts, as well as our other colleges and universities, because as we provide good solid education here, and affordable education, we not only help with the cost of a key factor of advancement in our world, but also it is an economy, an economic driver in and of itself as people want to come here to go to college. Housing, one of the most frustrating cost of living items for us here in Hawaii. I fight very much for federal programs of rental assistance, such as Section 8A, to help out those in need. But beyond that, the federal government has many policies and programs that it can pursue to help us to lower the cost of living, to be able to build the houses that we need to take care of supply. This is actually a good news story because just a couple of weeks ago in the House, we passed on a bipartisan basis probably one of the most relevant housing assistance programs or bills in probably a generation, I would say, called the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. There are many attributes to that particular bill, which is now back in the Senate, but it is at least encouraging as some bipartisan effort to tackle housing. Another area that I work very much on for the cost of living here are our overall appropriations. So appropriations are federal funding to Hawaii and to parts of Hawaii. And I'll get much more into approps because I'm deeply involved in that. But we have to remember that as our federal government helps us with many of our challenges, it's also helping us with our cost of living. And let's not forget about the income side of this, because sometimes we think about the cost of living as only on the expense side. But if we have income up faster than expenses, we don't want expenses to go up, but at least it's a little bit more manageable. The problem is if we have expenses going up because of high inflation and high cost escalation and incomes are not keeping up with them, that's where we fall behind, and that's where it becomes a crippling issue for all of us, which is happening as we speak. So let's not forget that as we help ourselves with good, solid job availability and better jobs, creating better incomes, then we are also helping with the cost of living. And I try very much to focus on that as well as the expense side through supporting our key industries, particularly tourism, number one, defense, number two, construction, number three, agriculture, number four, but also to generate new industries that can provide good, solid paying jobs. And this is particularly true in the technology area where we're starting to see some real success here with the creation of good, solid jobs, and many of our folks that left for better, what they thought were better horizons elsewhere, seeing that those jobs are available and coming home to fill them, and that's what we want to do. The same thing is true with education. So again, on the cost of living, there's no one factor, no secret silver bullet. You have to pursue all of the cost drivers and an income solution all at the same time, all throughout the federal government, as I've tried to do. And you have to partner with our state and county government and community partners, because this is not going to work if the federal government is going in one direction and our state and county government and communities are going in another direction. Each of us has a role to play in putting this together, and I try very hard to work with all of my partners to stay coordinated. So that's the cost of living. Let me talk now about the Trump administration. And I'm going to put out the context that it's surprising to me that sometimes I hear something different, and I don't know where it comes from. But I'm going to just put it out there again. My job as a member of Congress under our Constitution is to act as a part of a separate, independent, and co-equal branch of government, separate from the administration, which is the executive branch, independent from the administration and the executive branch, and co-equal. I must and should work as I do with any president and any administration where I can. We should do that in government. But no president, especially not this one, is my boss. My job is to represent you, the people, in Congress, part of a separate, independent, and co-equal branch of government. And so that's a basic concept here, and that is my job. You can support this president or not support this president, but my job is not to automatically knee-jerk support this president, or for that matter, to oppose this president. Um, this second Trump presidency, and I served in the first Trump presidency for 2 years, this second Trump presidency administration is at best confusing, chaotic, and erratic, and at worst, destructive and dangerous. And I've worked with this administration where I can, and I will continue to do that. I've talked about some of the areas I've worked with this administration. I've worked with it on waiving the Jones Act to help us with oil supply during the Iran war. I definitely have continued to work with this administration to deliver Maui wildfire disaster assistance to Maui, and definitely now the Kona Low storm assistance. And I've worked very well with this administration with our relations, for example, with many of our Pacific Islands ohana. And so I'll do it if I can. But I have fundamentally opposed many of this administration's actions. I've opposed their policies, which I don't believe in many cases are the right overall policies for all Americans, or for that matter, for the world. I have certainly opposed what I view are many instances of this administration's non-compliance with. And finally, and most really severely, the most concerning, I have definitely opposed this administration in instances where I believe that they have pursued outright attacks on some of our democratic foundations and acted in a way that is unconstitutional. My actions have taken many forms. I have many tools, and I've pursued them all where I needed to. The most obvious is my legislation and my actual votes, my votes on your behalf. I've also participated with other like-minded colleagues in joint letters and statements opposing various administration actions. Finally, I've participated also in lawsuits, excuse me, because members of Congress can participate in lawsuits through what we call amicus curiae briefs, and I have done that. On my website at case.house.gov is, at last count, a 246-page summary of the various things that I've done to oppose this president, where I've laid out the details of all of these areas of opposition. I think it's also important to note that if you take a look at our system of government today in this Trump administration, probably major and most concerning failing, in my view, has been the reluctance of my Republican majority colleagues in Congress to also exert their constitutional obligation to exert checks and balances on this president. I don't believe that anybody checks their constitutional obligation. Some becomes a shadow part of the executive branch, even if they do support a particular president. And yet we simply have not had significant checks and balances on this president by many of my Republican colleagues in Congress, collectively or even individually. And many of these people are my friends, my colleagues that I work with where I can. But that is a big challenge. And so I have worked inside Congress, almost all behind the scenes, not in public, not in the media, and not by yelling and screaming and swearing, but by talking to them and working with them where I can on areas where we can act as an independent, separate branch of government on key proposals to provide alternatives to what the president is providing. Much of that I do through my Problem Solvers Caucus, which I am a vice chair of. The Problem Solvers Caucus is a bipartisan caucus of about 50 of us, split evenly between Republicans and colleagues and Democrats that have worked to solve many of our worst problems. We are engaged, for example, in infrastructure reform, which we were very successful at. We've dealt with reforming immigration and customs enforcement, immigration. I'm currently participating with the Problem Solvers on an effort to curb the abuses of redistricting and gerrymandering throughout our country. And so this work goes on behind the scenes, but it is, in my view, some of the most critical work if we are really going to provide an effective check and balance on this administration. And all of this fight will obviously continue as long as the president is the president, as long as I'm in Congress. Finally, I want to talk about appropriations. Appropriations is my single biggest job in Congress. Appropriations takes up most of my time, and it does so because I am now a senior member of our House Appropriations Committee. I'm in my 8th year of service on appropriations. The Appropriations Committee oversees and molds our annual federal funding bills. So we are responsible for overseeing and funding all of our federal government, and that's a big job. And obviously, we need to spend the time to both oversee and decide where funding should go to. And every year, we pass 12 separate bills, each of them having a chunk of the federal government. It all totals up in the current year to about $1.6 trillion. And this is for me both a national leadership position, given my seniority now in approps. I specialize in our defense subcommittee, which has all of our defense budget, as well as our Homeland Security subcommittee, which has all of Homeland Security as it indicates. But it is also a major ability on my part to help our Hawaii with our own needs, since I can speak very directly to the activities of our federal government, positive or negative, that help our Hawaii, and of course funding Hawaii's needs. And this results in pretty consistent annual federal appropriations to Hawaii in the billions of dollars, which is a major part of our overall state and county budgets. It's also something that comes in incredibly important in the emergencies and the special opportunities that we have faced. And I've faced a bunch of those in the last 8 years of my current service in Congress. During COVID, we brought billions of emergency assistance into Hawaii to help us get through that terrible epidemic. Red Hill, an incredible crisis in and of itself, where we were able to get billions to deal with Red Hill and are still funding Red Hill. Maui wildfires, of course, another couple $1 billion for that. And now the Kona lows, which are estimated at over $1 billion of total storm damage. I've also worked very hard to pass a bipartisan infrastructure law a few years back, which yielded billions of dollars to our Hawaii to fix our infrastructure, as well as our Inflation Reduction Act, which also brought billions here. We are right in the middle, as I speak, of our fiscal year 2027 appropriations. And we're working our way through those 12 bills. In fact, this week, I leave tomorrow and I arrive Wednesday morning in DC and have to go straight into a committee hearing on our transportation and housing appropriations, a measure, and then the next day, interior. And so this is a very full, very active part of my job that I spend a lot of time and energy on, and I'm able to help greatly where we can focus as partners in what we need here. Also, as a part of this, I pursue what we now call community project funding, and this is the ability of a member of Congress to specify funding to a specific project, a specific needy, worthy project in our districts. There are many controls against any kind of abuse. You can see all of that on my website, case.house.gov. But I'm really proud that working with good, solid partners here in state and county government, as well as our nonprofit community, I've been able to fund about 54 projects now over the last 5 years, totaling about $307 million. These are things as large as a Red Hill water filter, which is really critical to the Red Hill recovery, to trying to help out an intermediate school with upgrading its media center, to helping out some of our great community health clinics with their particular primary healthcare needs, to helping some of our nonprofits with their particular issues. We've done a lot with law enforcement to provide them with the tools they need to address crime, to assure public safety. All of this information is on my website. Those are the three big areas I wanted to cover with you, and I've left so much. So we talked about, we talked about the cost of living, we talked about the Trump administration, we talked about appropriations, and those three are plenty in terms of my world. But of course, there's 1,000 others, and there's so many that we haven't talked about here, from the war in Iran, the threat of war elsewhere, to healthcare, veterans, defense, civil rights, small business, labor, women's issues, natural resources, foreign affairs, energy, and much more. And there is information on my website on my efforts and activities and accomplishments in each of these and more areas at casehouse.gov. And we can get into those in the course of questions. Finally, I want to highlight my individual constituent services. Remember that I said my mission was threefold. Number one, national leadership. Number two, help Hawaii. And number three, help you. And so now let me talk about number three, helping you with your individual constituent services. I started in politics with my predecessor a couple of decades back, a U.S. Congressman and then Senator Spark Matsunaga. And one thing I learned from him was that each of us, whether we like it or not, is going to engage our federal government, or the federal government is going to engage us at some point in our lives. And that can either be a positive or a negative experience. And when it is not working the way it should, our job is to help you sort it through. And that's what I've tried to do with individual constituent services. We provide any assistance that we can to you, even if it's not the federal government. We'll try to guide you to the state government, county government, or elsewhere, or simply answer your questions. Sometimes you just need an answer to a question, and we may know the answer. But the areas that we do specialize in are the areas where we have a connection to the federal government, where that federal government provides the services and where the hangups often occur. So some of those areas that we have, particularly here in our office in Honolulu, are immigration, given that we are such an active immigration community here. Social Security and Medicare are major parts of our constituent services. Veterans and military affairs. We have helped many, many veterans and many, many active duty military with their issues. Tax issues with the IRS come up. But again, anything you have, we'll try to help, even if it's just guiding you to the right place. We've helped about 1,000 individual constituents a year. And then, of course, in very difficult times, it goes up significantly to, for example, in the COVID years, thousands and thousands of people needed our help. You can reach us on individual constituent services through case.house.gov, or again, my office, 808-650-6688. Okay, that went a little longer than half an hour. I apologize, but I tried to just give you a big picture overview of my office, what we're doing, how to get the information that you need, how to get your questions answered, what my areas of focus are, what my many, many other areas are, and tried to give you, again, some sense of what's going on in Washington from a big picture, what our challenges are, but also, in my view, what our opportunities are and what we can achieve together if we just continue to keep our mind and direction on practical solutions to problems, realistically working it through and continuing to talk to each other. Division and polarization are not going to work. They're not going to get us through this. And it's one thing to disagree on policy. It's another thing to consider that your fellow citizen is not a good person because they have a different viewpoint, that they don't somehow care just as much about this country. That thinking that unfortunately too much of our national leadership tries to foster nowadays is not going to get us through this. It's not my way, at least. With that, I'm going to turn this over to your questions for the time that we have remaining. And I am going to start working my way down through the list that I have here that has my questions. And so I'm just going to start from the top here. Jeff asks, where will we begin to heal and reverse the damage Trump has caused um, us and the United States and our standing in the world? Two areas to focus on here. First of all, in our system of checks and balances, if we have a working system of checks and balances, if we have a working Congress, regardless of who's in control in Congress, if Congress is doing its job, then we are at least checking this president. And again, my view and my belief is that we are in the situation we're in, and not just because President Trump chooses what I believe are not the right decisions for our country, whether it's our international standing. Didn't agree with the president on basically withdrawing from much of the world. I didn't agree with the president on terminating funding of key programs to much of the world that people depend on for their very lives. Certainly, I certainly disagree with the president that he has the sole authority to wage war, whether it's Iran or elsewhere. And so, but the problem is again that Congress, at least under the current majority, is not providing that check and balance. So this is an unchecked president, and that's dangerous. And so, if either the Republican majority can, find its way to actually fulfilling its constitutional duty, or the majority is replaced, then we will have an effective system of checks and balances. But the bigger picture really is that we have the leaders that we elect in this country, and we have elected leaders today across the country, and those leaders are doing what they're doing. And so ultimately, how do we reverse the damage in your case? And I believe you're accurate in many areas. Um, that's something that the American people have to decide is what they want, and that's a matter of elections. Let's see. Mo asks, can you offer insight on the future of Social Security benefits? I'm 64 and plan to apply at 67 for my full retirement age. So there's nothing that is going to happen in the next 3 years or 5 years or 8 years that affects you personally. There will not be any changes, nor would I ever support any changes that would affect people that are right there, right at retirement age, or even anywhere close. But let me talk about reality. Um, this is the reality that I talked about. This is the reality of facing our challenges honestly, identifying solutions, and acting upon them in the best way we can. Many times, well in advance of when it becomes a problem. If I know something's a problem in 10 or 20 years, frankly, I want to fix it today so it's not a problem in 10 or 20 years. I don't want to kick it down the road so at year 9 I'm facing a crisis. And Social Security is on that path. And this is not me talking, okay? This is the trustees of the Social Security Trust Fund. So we operate the Social Security Fund as a trust fund. Money comes in, money goes out. Trustees are responsible for making sure it's sustainable over time. And what the trustees tell us, these are independent trustees. You can find their report online. If you can't, I'll send it to you. What they tell us is that because expenses are exceeding income into the trust fund, that somewhere around 8 to 9 years from now, the trust fund will be depleted. And at that point, there will be an automatic reduction of benefits unless we fix Social Security. Now, that's the reality. And sometimes people don't like to hear it, and sometimes they get angry and they try to shoot the messenger. But here I am, the messenger, and I'm telling you that's the case. And so we have to act on Social Security to be able to assure that it works for all of us over the next generations. It's been one of the most successful programs that we have ever enacted in our country. It has lifted literally tens of millions out of poverty, saved people from death. This is a great program, but it is not on a sustainable path. And so I have introduced a number of pieces of legislation in Congress to fix Social Security, make sure it is sustained over time. These solutions do not have to call for radical reductions of benefits, which would be the case if we did nothing. And so that's the reality of Social Security. Again, I don't think it's going to affect your own decision, but the reality is that we do have to act now to sustain it over time. Daniel asks, how can we preserve our alliances? This is a critical question for us because in our world, which is a dangerous world, I talked about the People's Republic of China who want to supplant us. I talked about Russia, who is, pursuing a fifth year of war, completely unauthorized war against any rule of international law in Ukraine. These people do not have our best interests in mind, and they will continue to pursue these directions unless we deter them from doing so. And for that, we have to provide many things. First of all, of course, always a strong national defense. I'm very deeply involved in that. We also have to help the rest of the world with their issues, whether it's trade or whether it's what we call soft power, which is development assistance, assistance with infrastructure development. We cannot and should not do this alone. We cannot do this alone. And so we need our friends and allies around the world to work with us, and they want to work with us. They don't want to go into another form of governance. They don't want the PRC to dominate their country, their space, their trade, to dictate to them what they can and cannot do, reduce them to a vassal state. And yet we have, under this administration, I believe, not done right by many of our alliances. We have arbitrarily imposed tariffs, even on our friends and allies, countries like Japan and Korea, Australia. We have walked away from international agreements that help the rest of the world. We have sent inconsistent messages on our intent to continue to participate in the world. And this is all very, very dangerous for us. And so, frankly, the way to preserve our alliances is to preserve our alliances. And that takes either a change in the direction of the current leadership of our country or a change in the current leadership of our country. All right. Let's see. Karen, I think that is, asks, what are you actively doing to try to reestablish the U.S. Congress as the Article 1 responsible entity to control our people's money? Well, I think that's what you asked. This is very, very much part of my job as an appropriator. My job as an appropriator is to assert our Article 1 authority and responsibility to decide how the people's money is going to be spent. And Article 1 refers to Article 1 of the Constitution, which in so many words says that the people govern themselves through Congress. People govern themselves through Congress. And so appropriations is one of those areas. And so I have actively opposed this president when this president has tried to stop the funding of monies that have already been appropriated by Congress, already signed into law. If you see my 246-page summary of my actions to oppose this president, many of those will be in this space. I've also opposed rescissions of monies, and I've actually participated in lawsuits in court to stop the president from doing what he is trying to do, which is to basically usurp Congress's constitutional authority to govern this country. And so there's much more on my website. I agree with you. That is one of our principal issues. And again, I'm deeply involved in it from a appropriations committee perspective. I'm going to shift over here. What more can be done to reduce gas prices? What can be done in other ways as we approach the summer travel season? Okay. Thank you for that question. I spoke at length already about there's two parts, I guess, of the answer to that question. Why are gas prices high? Well, obviously, the first part of gas prices being high is immediate to the situation we're confronted with right now, which is the Iran war. Of course, one of the consequences of the Iran war that I don't believe this president fully thought through was the impact on world oil supplies and world oil shipping to move oil supplies around. 20% of the world's oil comes through the Straits of Hormuz, which Iran, of course, is, as a practical matter, influencing very deeply right now. And you can't take 20% of world oil off the market in any way, shape, or form and not have oil prices and gas at the end of the day go up. So clearly, one solution is to restore some stability in world oil supply as well as world oil shipping. But beyond that, the fact is that we do have to continue, and I'm speaking only about the federal government, because I believe that there's some very significant solutions, that, especially in the state government, that can reduce our gas prices here. But clearly, from a gas price perspective, we again need to move to renewable forms of energy, because if oil is competing with gas and kerosene and diesel and petroleum and fertilizer as byproducts of oil, then obviously that's different than if we've got energy being created by renewable sources that are not using oil, and that's before we even discuss moving our gas, our vehicles off of gas to start with wherever we can. And so this is a part of a big picture strategy that's partly just big picture long-term federal policy in partnership with state and county governments, as well as dealing with the real consequences of disruptions in world oil supply from crises, whether they be natural disasters or wars. Matt asks, I got a question for Medicare. Why is the president taking away Medicare for us Hawaii people? Matt, referring to, well, there's two things going on. First of all, I think what you probably are referring to is Medicaid. And Medicaid is the federal law that assists states to give people, especially people that really have no practical option to get health care anywhere else, to make sure that they have health care. This is a basic human need. It's something that we need to assure to all of us, not just those of us that are lucky enough to have good, solid health care plans, even if we're paying too much for them. And so this president has gone after Medicaid. This was our so-called budget reconciliation bill from last year. I fought against that very, very hard. My Republican colleagues passed it out of Congress. The president signed it. And that is reducing federal contributions to Medicaid throughout the country, including right here in Hawaii, where we have a very high Medicaid population. And so that is causing the state government to have to step up to the plate and supplement that in many ways. And so I'm hoping that we reverse those cuts to Medicaid because I don't believe that that is at all acceptable. This administration has also taken some more recent actions that affect Medicare costs as well. That is also, from my perspective, not acceptable. I spoke earlier about Social Security and how critical a program that is. Well, Medicare is a critical program also, especially for older folks as they retire and don't have employer-sponsored plans. But Medicare also takes care of many, many other people, not just seniors. And the president has gone after Medicare as well to try to curb benefits under Medicare. Some of that, by the way, I think is getting a little confused with some of the actions of some of our healthcare companies that are curtailing voluntarily on their own dime programs such as Medicare Advantage, which again, many, many people here in Hawaii rely upon. As to why the president is doing that, you can read his statements. I don't agree with him. What he believes, I suppose, is that the federal government should not be helping people in great need, and that's not the government that I believe in. Let's see, you also asked Matt, I'll just read this. How do you feel about Trump calling us a racial nation and not a tribal nation? And are we going to get any justice about it? And when are we going to do about gas, Medicaid, and the war with Iran? Well, I don't agree with the president's statements about racial nation. I think we're one nation. Clearly, I think we're just as much, from a national perspective as we treat that here in Hawaii. We're a model for the rest of the country. So, any mention of racial division, stoking any racial fires is unacceptable. I think for anybody, including especially a president of the United States. I do. If you're referring by tribal nation to the indigenous peoples of our country, including Native Hawaiians, I very much support our programs and our longstanding laws and understandings and treaties in many cases with our indigenous peoples here in Hawaii. Of course, we're the home the Native Hawaiians, the indigenous peoples of our country whose origins lie in Hawaii. They're a major part of my own constituency, and I focus very much on their particular situation and needs, and try to advance, especially federal programs built up over a couple of generations now of assistance to Native Hawaiian education, healthcare, business, and on and on. You can see a summary of that on my website. But the president and his administration are clearly going after many of those programs now. And that to me is just in complete opposition to long established law and long established constitutional authority and dozens of federal laws benefiting, not hundreds, benefiting indigenous peoples. And so I strongly oppose all of those efforts, especially as they affect Native Hawaiians. You asked about the war with Iran, which obviously is a critical issue for us today. I haven't fully addressed it. So let me start with a couple of observations. First of all, Iran is, under its current leadership, under its current status in the world, is not our friend. That should be obvious. So I'm under no illusions at all that Iran, under its current leadership, is a threat to our country and to our world. And Iran is not going to stop its ambitions, which are to foment terrorism and to develop a nuclear capability that it believes will allow it to do what it wants to do without any country standing in its way. And we need to make sure that both of those things stop. And we can only hope that the leadership of Iran will change so we can welcome Iran into kind of the community of nations, because it can be a great country. The people of Iran, many of whom I've met, are great people, and they deserve far better. But none of that justifies a president waging war on another country without congressional authorization. That's fundamental to our Constitution. That is a direct requirement of our law. And this president has not done that. And so I have opposed him and this war because I believe it's unauthorized. Now, if the president came in to Congress and said, this is a situation we face, these are the options that we have, these are the consequences of each of those options, these are the costs, and this is what I think we should do, and I'm asking you to work with me and to authorize these actions, then I would consider it, because I believe that there could be circumstances under which war with Iran would be justified. This president hasn't done any of that. And so from my perspective, not only was this a hastily thought up war that the president obviously thought was going to be over inside of 2 to 3 weeks, not only is it having widespread consequences around the world. I already talked about oil prices, but more severely, really, the ability of friends and allies to even defend themselves is possibly affected, and those consequences we can't ignore. And so I have voted for a war powers resolution that basically says the president can't continue unless Congress authorizes it 3 or 4 times already. I'm going to have another vote this week on it. And I'm going to keep voting that way until this president does what he is required to do under our Constitution, which is to come to Congress and talk with us, and through us, the American people, about why it is so important that we wage war in Iran, that we lose our own, as we already have. 13 of our incredible service members have been lost in Iran, that we use significant portions of our national defense capacity, that we have other consequences, both anticipated and unanticipated. I can't. I don't think any president should have the unchecked authority to enter us into war, and we've seen that throughout our history that's a bad idea. Jonathan asks, what are you doing to protect essential government workers? Why won't you consider passing legislation to ensure those workers don't miss a paycheck? Well, I've absolutely supported legislation sure that essential government workers don't miss a paycheck during unfortunate government shutdowns, as we've seen too often over the past crippling year, even with a number of shutdowns. So I don't know where you're getting that information from. If you can email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov, I can give you a longer summary of my activities. And I have fought very, very hard to avoid government shutdowns to start with. Again, I'm on the Appropriations Committee. I believe that many of my fellow colleagues on appropriations work very hard to get our government funded. It gets tangled up in frankly, unacceptable disputes where people hold up government funding to achieve some very minority end. And so I'm working very hard to make sure we don't have government shutdowns to start with, but that our government workers are also taken care of when we do have shutdowns. And so, again, if you want to talk further about that, let me know. Okay, I'm going to have to start moving along a little bit here. Let's see, RM, how could we invest in improved public housing and update policy and procedures? Let's see, for housing first that will address chronic housing needs. Yes, I agree with you on this, and I do not believe that the administration is pursuing the right policies in terms of federal assistance to housing. Basically, this administration in many areas wants to get out of the business of helping on housing, especially those in significant need. Now, I don't think the federal government is responsible for everybody's housing throughout the country. That's not the job of the federal government. But the federal government, I think, can help and should help with those in particular need, as we do with rental assistance with 8A. We also appropriate a lot of money every year for the federal government to help with the development of affordable housing, and we provide federal tax credits that will assist with affordable housing. And I agree with all of that. But I don't agree with this administration's attempt to curtail all of those programs because I think they're critical to us taking care of one of the principal drivers of the high cost of living here, as well as just an area where people need to live in a house, in a dwelling. And so that's a core need, and I think we all have a responsibility through our governments to try to help out with that. Let's see. We've got a question here on mental health crisis from David. Kind of the same answer as the prior one on housing. We clearly do have many areas that are in crisis, as you put it, from a mental health perspective, with many of our fellow citizens suffering from many types of mental health from many causes. And I think that we have tried to help again through the federal government with programs that help. I'm particularly focused, for example, on our veterans who have some very severe mental health issues, especially combat related, but not exclusively. We have just unacceptably high rates of veteran suicide still that just grieve you every time you hear about another one. And so these are areas where our federal government should legitimately try to help. And again, this is an area where really in the whole part of our government that you want to divide up our federal government into kind of defense and non-defense, and we'd spend roughly the same amount of money in defense, where you see this administration trying to reduce the non-defense side by 10, 20, 30% in some areas while they're increasing defense. And I don't believe that either of those is the right answer, and they have to be in some balance. I do believe that we need to provide for our national defense, but we cannot do that at the expense of some programs that literally mean life and death to many, many people out there. You can get more information on the website or else email me. Let's see. Pamela, you asked me kind of the same question on public housing, but if you need more information, please email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov. Let's see. PM, you asked, how can we extend Ward Village security to include Queen and Waimanu streets in Kaka'ako? I have heard about this issue. It is not directly a federal issue, and so I would probably not get directly involved in this. This is an issue probably for the city. However, this is a good example of individual constituent services where you have a question, you have a need. I'm not really the right person to act on it for you because it's not a direct connection to my office, but we can certainly try to get you in touch with the right people. What we would normally do in this is we would refer you over to the city, the right people in the city, and we'd also connect you with your city council member for that district, so that the council member can actually, because that is their kuleana in particular. So if you want to give me a call at 808-7, sorry, that's about to go with my my cell, 808-650-6688 or ed.case@mail.house.gov. We will try to help you with that. Let's see. Leslie, politics is quid pro quo. What did you have to give up in order to obtain progress on your initiatives, i.e. KE funding, voter ID, etc.? I'm sorry, that's ICE funding. I guess I don't really look at it that way, to be honest, Leslie. We have a very small delegation. We have 4 members of our delegation out of 535 members of Congress. We're a very small fish in a very big pond, and we're 5,000 miles away from DC. And I can tell you from being in DC for many years now that DC don't get Hawaii. They don't understand us. They don't know a whole bunch about us. They're certainly intrigued by us, which is a good thing. But the fact is that I'm not in a big delegation like New York or California or Texas or Florida. So what I try to do, this is how I try to do it. I try to make the best decisions I can. And on votes that are important, broad votes and initiatives, I'm going to make the call with your guidance. One way or the other, it's not going to really matter, necessarily who wants me to do what and why. But where I can help people, my colleagues, I do try to help them. If they come to me, for example, I'll give you a good example. In Hawaii, we've had a very, very long partnership with the state of Alaska. Why? Because we came in at the same time. Somehow we were, kind of the new kids on the block, and we came in. We're both small states. Alaska only has 1 representative. And we need to band together. We also have we have a lot of similarities. We're both a long way away from the continent of the United States. We have some of the same issues as a result in high costs of living, or food, or shipping, or healthcare, and so indigenous peoples. And so if I can help my colleague from Alaska, whoever that is, and I've had 3 or 4 colleagues from Alaska since I was in Congress, sometimes R's and sometimes D's. If they come to me and say, hey, can you help me out with something from Alaska? It may not be something that I particularly know anything about, or it's not particularly relevant to my world, but they ask me for help. And as long as it's a good, solid effort, I'm going to try to help them. But I'm also going to feel free to go to them and ask them for help later on. Now, to me, that's not a quid pro quo. I'm not trading, a vote for, something that I wouldn't vote for against otherwise, because I don't do that. But I do try to help where I can. And so I think that's the way I try to handle and get things done for a very small state like Hawaii in a very, very big pond. Let's see, Ben, does the cost of healthcare register as a priority? Absolutely. It absolutely register as a priority. And I did try to speak to that earlier on in my opening remarks. Cost of healthcare is a major driver of the overall cost of living. There's many causes of the high cost of healthcare. It's very, very frustrating to get this right. We have it for part of America a great healthcare system, and for part of America not a great healthcare system. We have a lot of inequality on cost, and a lot of policies out there that are simply crippling the reforms that are needed in healthcare to provide high quality, affordable healthcare to all Americans. And so this is a very high priority to me, and it's a high priority to you. I've asked you collectively, directly, what are your priorities? This is one of the highest. And so I have a pretty long summary that I can send to you of that it kind of gives you an example of what I've done in the healthcare space. I mentioned a couple of them tonight. I believe very much in controlling the cost of prescription drugs, which is crippling to so many Americans. I believe very much in preserving and strengthening Medicare. I believe very much in Medicaid and oppose the reductions in Medicaid funding. We have some very, very specific changes that we could make in healthcare that would, help things along. That I'm hoping that I've co-sponsored in Congress that I'm hoping to pass. But I can give you a pretty long list if you will email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov, and I welcome your comments as well. Let's see. I think that's Helani. Do you support Section 224 of the NDAA? Actually, I've got a lot of incoming on this right now. I believe this refers. Haven't had a chance to dig into this. This just started to pick up in the last few days, but I believe this refers to cooperation between the United States and Israel in terms of technology development, especially in the defense space. And I have not read the specific language. The A is our annual military authorization bill that's actually coming before the House Armed Services Committee. Actually, I think it's tomorrow or the next day. So this is very topical right now. But I do believe that we should try to cooperate with other people throughout the world, especially those that we are partners with of our joint national defense, to develop technologies and to develop those industries and really take the best practices from each and the best results. And so, again, I haven't read this particular language, but we do this with a lot of countries around the world. Obviously, Israel is controversial in and of itself, which I suspect is why there's a lot of attention to Section 224 in particular. But it's not functionally different from what we do, for example, with Japan or Australia or the United Kingdom, et cetera. And as I understand it, the technology development under 224 is not direct weapons development. But again, I'll check. If you want to email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov, I'm sure that I will have a better answer for you in the next couple of days. And that's true of everybody else that has written me on this. Puakea, can Congress hope to control the president? While I spoke to this earlier, absolutely, Congress should hope to control the president. That's our job. We are supposed to be exerting checks and balances on this president. Again, I will repeat that one of the major failings of the current Congress generally, and my majority colleagues, my Republican majority colleagues in both the House and the Senate specifically, one of their major failings is ceding control of Congress to the president, functionally ceding control of Congress to the president. And that's very, very dangerous. What that means is that Congress is not doing our jobs. Again, this doesn't have to do with whether you support policies or not. Obviously, my Republican colleagues are probably going to prefer a Republican president to a Democratic president in general. But it is dangerous for them not to do their jobs, and that is what they either have to decide that they need to step up and check this president, or the solution at that point is that the majority has to change, or the Congress has to change by the will of the people, and that's kind of the reality right there. And that's, of course, why the midterm elections will say so much about which direction the people want this country to go in. Of course, that doesn't affect the president directly, but it certainly affects Congress. Um, let's see. Okay. Lisa, I'm concerned about our elections, which are solely by mail. Are we in danger from the current administration invalidating our secure voting process or seizing our voter records, as happened in Georgia? Tulsi Gabbard's watch. Let's see. First of all, our elections in Hawaii are not solely by mail. I mean, we do have an option for people to vote in person. I think the figure is something like 98% of our voting in Hawaii now is by mail. And by the way, I support voting by mail. I think that it has been successful. I think that it has opened up voting to many people who might not vote otherwise. And so I'm not somebody that opposes voting by mail, and I don't agree that there are fraud risks with widespread fraud risks with voting by mail. I think the checks are sufficient on that, but there is an option for in-person voting. So I have no problem with the system that Hawaii follows. Obviously, this president and this administration have consistently over time criticized election security. And have made it into, I think, a very unfortunate political issue, which causes many voters, too many voters to doubt their election results. And I think that is not an appropriate, position to take by this president. And I have certainly, of course, been concerned at the attempt to seize certain voting records by this president. In fact, I'm not just concerned about it, I strongly oppose it. I believe I'm even on some lawsuits at this point that go very much to this particular issue. So yes, we are concerned about that. And so I'm not going to sugarcoat your concern. I hope and believe that our combination of what check and balance there is in Congress, and I think many of my colleagues, including my Republican colleagues, do not agree with the president on this. Very much believe that we should, not particularly that we should not be pursuing, seizing voter records. There have been bills proposed that have not come up for a full vote, not because Democrats oppose them, but because Republicans themselves oppose them. So I think we need to continue that particular effort. And of course, the courts give us a great deal of latitude. They have been very, very deeply involved in this as well. Renee, what can we do about medical insurance costs? As a small business owner, I pay $2,700 a month for a family of 4. I've spoken to this, I've tried to speak to this a couple of times. That's not acceptable. That cost is way up. It is crippling. It comes from a lot of different areas. That's not anything that anybody should accept. There are many solutions. Some of the solutions are at the federal government level with reforms to national health care. I talked about the cost of prescription drugs. We have a number of kind of intermediary steps in terms of prescription drugs and the other delivery of healthcare that are basically taking too much money out of the system. And so and that's before we get to some of the solutions that we can pursue at the state government level as well. I don't think I'm giving you a fully satisfactory answer, and that's because this is a very tough area to get to the bottom of all of the answers. But I have prepared these 14 or 15 pages of a summary of my efforts in terms of trying to curb healthcare costs, ranging from administrative costs, taking over too much of the system, to controlling the actual cost of prescription drugs, making sure that the supply chains are open for medical equipment. Tariffs have very significantly affected much of that, because a lot of our medical equipment that comes into our country, either in finished product or in raw product, comes from other countries, and it's subject to very, very high tariffs. And so when the president goes out there and imposes high tariffs on medical equipment, that cost is going to be passed along to you through your healthcare insurance. But this is, again, a multifaceted problem, and we've got to chip away at solutions on a number of levels. Tammy, is there any updates on the potential theft by Elon's Doge bro, who downloaded very sensitive information from the Social Security Administration database, affecting possibly millions of dead and alive citizens under the jurisdiction of the United States? I don't have an update for you. I believe that this is still under investigation and still under. I'm trying to remember whether this is subject to actually a criminal prosecution right now. If you will email me directly at ed.case@mail.house.gov, I will try to answer that, because I don't know the answer off the top of my head. Similarly to Eugene, you asked SSI, tax-free supplemental security income, right? I don't know. If you will email me, I'll try to answer that for you, because I just don't have the ins and outs of tax law. Let me go back to the other side here, see what I got. Let's see, let me just give me a chance to just screen through this and make sure that I got everything. Okay. I think that's the gist of what you asked me there. And unfortunately, I've got to wind this down at this point. So there's a couple of other questions that I'm not going to be able to get to, which I apologize for. If you will please email me your questions at ed.case@mail.house.gov. Some of the questions that you've asked are a little more complicated to answer, so I'm not going to get into them right here, but I do have comprehensive answers for you on several of the questions that I see are pending. Let me up with repeating a couple of things before our time expires. First of all, I really, really appreciate these opportunities to talk story with you, to, again, report to you on what I'm doing in Congress and why. But for me, it's not just about me telling you what I'm up to. I think that's actually secondary to your asking me your questions. So when you ask me questions, I learn from your questions. But also your guidance is really critical. I represent, again, 710,000 people throughout my district. That's 710,000 separate opinions on where we should be going as a country, as a Hawaii. And my job is to try my very, very best to represent all of my constituents as best I can. And for that, I need guidance. I need to think things through with you. I need to decide what the right thing is to do. Even if people don't agree with me, I still have to make those calls. I still have to try to do the right thing, and I can't do that without having a very open line of communication with each and all of you. So I appreciate that very much. Again, I'm going to repeat a little bit just to be sure that you have this down. Number one, the fastest, easiest, and most thorough way to get information on me is my website at case.house.gov. That's case.house.gov, and it's been flashing up on the screen here. I see throughout our talk. On my website, I have information on my activities. I have referred a couple of times here to summaries of my activities in various areas, but I have summaries pretty much on all of the areas that you have asked me questions about, from the Trump administration to national defense to healthcare. There's other stuff that we haven't talked about that is really critical to Social Security. There's other stuff that we haven't talked about here tonight in any real way that I think is also very, very critical, and that I have information on my website about, which would include, again, things like veterans, civil rights, which is a critical part of my agenda, small business, given that our state is really the king of small business, with virtually all of our businesses being small businesses. Labor, a summary of my efforts in terms of labor, women-related issues, a long summary on that, natural resources, foreign affairs, and more. That's all on my website, and I can also send that information to you if you will email me. I also have on my website my votes, all of my votes, right there on my website, so you can easily see how I vote, fully transparent. I also have information on my activities on appropriations, including my community project funding. I also have all of my press releases and statements, et cetera, on my website. And finally, information on our constituent services, as well as how to contact me. That's all on my website. Again, also email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov, questions or needs, or you can call my district office at 808-650-6688. With that, our time is up. It's never enough. I always finish these things wishing that there was more time, but I really appreciate all of you who joined us here tonight. Again, with your further questions and comments, just get in touch with us. I hope to see you along the way. I'll be out and about my community, as I always do. And if you see me, please stop me and ask me your questions. It is my deep honor to serve you in Congress. It's a responsibility that I take very, very seriously, and that I consider myself to be your full partner in a better country, a better world, a better Hawaii. So with that, aloha and ahui ho.